In this video, I'm giving an update on the Lorch Model A lathe I introduced a few weeks ago.
Welcome to Adventures with a Very Small Lathe.
One of the problems of owning an antique machine tool is trying to add or replace tooling for it. Older machines don't have the same standard fittings and tapers as modern machines, and it can be hard to get hold of the manuals and specifications of the fittings for reference. Since I bought the Lorch Model A plain turning lathe, I've been learning as much as I can about it to make it complete. I've been scouring eBay to find compatible tooling to extend its capabilities, which has its own challenges. The right tooling in really good condition is extremely rare. When I do find it, it's offered for sale by professional dealers who are looking for very high prices. A dedicated collector might be willing to pay these prices, but while I love old machines, I have to be more practical about what I can pay. Frustratingly, some dealers break old machines down into their component parts and sell them individually. It looks as though they do this so they can get better prices for the parts and pieces of tooling than they would for the fully capable machine combined. Splitting them up this way pretty much guarantees that nobody will ever get the machine put together again, as they'd need to win the eBay auction for every single part at the higher price. Some of these older machines have numbered parts which were hand scraped to fit, so they'll never fit another machine quite as well as they did to their original. This means a machine sold as parts is effectively permanently lost. Because of this, I'm reluctant to buy from dealers that use this business model, as I don't want to support it. The final challenge is that shipping heavy items is difficult, and a lot of sellers prefer to avoid it by offering collection only. So, I find myself checking eBay very regularly, often searching hundreds of listings. Just after Christmas, I came across a listing that caught my eye. A Lorch plain turning lathe in fully working condition with a wide range of collets and tooling. The price was really good, and while I'd need to collect it myself, it was a distance I could fairly easily travel. I bid, I won, and a few days later I set off to collect the machine. This is the machine I found when I arrived to collect it. I immediately noticed it was much larger than I was expecting, and after checking it over, it didn't appear to quite match the Lorch Model A I already owned. The seller helped me take it down the stand and load it up, which turned out to be more challenging than I was expecting due to the size. Once I got it home, I fired up lathes.co.uk and chatted to Emma Ritson to try and work out what I had. It turns out to be a Lorch BVIR or B6R, if VI is read as Roman numerals. It's a lot heavier than any of the Model A series and has one or two features that were limited to a few A models. It's also quite a bit newer than my very early Model A and was probably manufactured around the mid-20th century. The stand it came with is original, and these bolts thread directly into the cast iron frame, making it very rigid. Unlike the Model A, this lathe was sold in essentially working condition. It had been set up to run off a motor on this frame at the back of the stand with a small line shaft at the top. The motor itself is much newer than the lathe and is big enough to have a decent amount of power. The two drive belts are intact but very heavily worn and clearly need to be replaced. The drive stand attaches to two rails bolted to the top of the stand, and it just needs to be bolted back in the same location and it should be good to go. The bolt holes pretty much register the stand into place, ensuring the distance between the shaft and the lathe spindle pulley stays the same. Hopefully this means the main belt to the spindle pulley will be the right length and tension still. There are 4 bolts, one at each corner, and with all 4 tightened up, the frame is nice and rigid. Before working on the electrics, I put the plug in plain sight in front of me so I can be absolutely certain it's not plugged in. The motor wiring had to be removed from the electrical control box to take down the stand, so now I need to put it back. The box is clearly pretty old, but it looks like the flex is much newer, and the switch mechanism looks in good order. I'm not totally convinced it's ideal for everyday use. I need to make sure I can shut the lathe down in a hurry in case something goes wrong. It's too low down on the frame and not as foolproof as a modern big red button with locking action, so I may need to fit a new shut-off switch. I took a reference photo of the wiring before I broke it down for transport, and this flex was tucked neatly to the left of the switch mechanism, so I'll put it back there once I have it connected. As I was wiring this up, I started thinking over what tasks and projects a lathe like this would be suited to, as it's a lot bigger than I'd been planning for. It's a plain turning lathe, so has no features for threading or automatic feed, but it's fundamentally more solid as there are fewer sliding surfaces. It's a direct belt-driven spindle, which means it should have much less vibration than a lathe with gears in the drivetrain. It also has a back gear, which means it's capable of much higher torque at low RPM than any lathe I've owned before. The bed is extremely solid and heavy, which should make it ideal for work which requires a lot of rigidity. All this means it's well suited to jobs where a good surface finish is required and can deal with tools that have a lot of engagement. However, if I need to cut threads, I'm going to have to make a thread cutting attachment like the one Emma made for her Lorch Model A. Now the control box is wired up, I plug it into the breaker for testing. The motor and line shaft spin up just fine, so far so good. I shouldn't run it for too long as I haven't checked on the condition of the line shaft bearings or its lubrication. Next step is the flat belt. The belt from the motor to the drive shaft is a segmented V-belt which is very worn but still seems to work fine. The other belt is a flat belt, which is a type of belt I've never used before. Fortunately, the seller showed me how to link it together and I could watch Emma Ritson's videos among others to learn more. The alligator clip at the ends of the belt is attached together with a ribbed pin which then stays in place holding the belt together as the machine runs. The belt is aged, worn and stretched and definitely needs to be replaced. Once the belt is linked together, I need to work it into place on one of the pairs of pulleys. The belt feels tight and difficult to get onto this middle pair, so I moved it to the pair to the right, which should be a faster spindle speed. There have been conversations recently on Emma's livestream about modern alternatives to leather for making flat belts, so I'll be looking into those to see what makes sense. The belt works, but to my eye it looks loose. I need to learn more before I know how to correctly size and fit a new belt, so I have homework to do. This is the original cross slide, which is bolted down onto the bed in much the same way as the cross slide of the Model A. It looks like it's been in storage for a while and all the contact surfaces look very dry. There's also quite a bit of surface rust, but fortunately nothing that looks too deep or pitted. This will need to be fully stripped down and cleaned, but before I do anything else I'm going to get plenty of oil onto it. Just like the Model A, I'm aiming to oil every point where two metal parts make contact. The most obvious places are the sliding surfaces, but I'm also aiming to oil any screws and fasteners or any seams where the two sections can come apart. The oil will start dissolving any dried up old lubricants and make it fundamentally easier to take apart, reducing the risk of any damage due to stuck parts during disassembly. The plan is to let this oil soak in and dissolve for several hours before I even try and remove the first screw. The other obvious place that needs oil is the spindle bearing cup oilers, and a little too much can't hurt at this point. Overall, I'm really happy to have bought this, but it wasn't really my plan and it's changed my priorities a bit. This is a way more useful and promising machine than the Model A, so for now it's going to take over as my main priority. It shouldn't take much effort to get this into working condition, and I'll be making short videos about all the work I do as I do it. The first priorities are going to be cleaning, lubricating and fixing up the belts, and learning about flat belts will be the biggest challenge for now. Let me know if you have any flat belt tips or can point me in the direction of some good guides. Thanks for watching, take care, I love you all.